welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker is joining me via the wonderful world of Skype. And Justin, on this day where we preview the Pacific Division for the second time, the goal is that it only be for a second time. No third time on this one, okay?
Oh, I can't promise anything, but I will do my best.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could do a full hour and a half just on the San Jose Sharks, but it might get a little dragged down. I don't even know if an actual San Jose Sharks podcast is talking about like just a season preview for an hour and a half. That would, I suppose you could go into each player and whatnot. We're not gonna go into every player. That would just be too much for our. I guess you could call this a national show, is what you would call us. We talk about every team. So, but Justin, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Marcus. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I was back in my woods just a little bit ago, and with my tractor, and I found some weird old tractor thing in the back. Old tractor thing. Yeah, it was like it had a big handle, big tall handle, probably 5 feet off the ground. And from there, that handle went down onto some kind of like an engine of some sort. And then there were two giant wheels. And one of the wheels is completely deteriorated, and the other one was in good shape. So I started to try and drag it out of the woods. And then I realized that it was 4:50, and I came running inside because we podcast at 5. So yeah, that's where we left off in my exciting life. As some weird tractor thing in the woods. So if you missed our last show, we hit the Calgary Flames, the Seattle Kraken, Vancouver Canucks, and the Vegas Golden Knights. You can go back and listen to that. And on today's show, we're going to hit the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings, San Jose Sharks, and finally the Anaheim Ducks. I think we said it in our last show, but just that maybe this division has had the most growth in one calendar year in comparison to any other division. Is that fair to say? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say.
Like from top to bottom, a year ago we were, is Calgary a playoff team, and then they go and they win the division. We're talking about, can Edmonton get over the hump and win in the playoffs? They go to the conference finals, and granted they get beat up pretty good by the Colorado Avalanche, but they certainly took a big step. The Anaheim Ducks, I think we can all agree they took a big step. The LA Kings, certainly by making the playoffs, took a huge step. Even the Vancouver Canucks, to a certain extent, took a step. Just they kind of took a step backwards, and then they took the step forward that we thought they would. And then, of course, maybe the only team that really took a step backwards was the Vegas Golden Knights. So pretty decent showing there for the Pacific Division. But let's start with the Edmonton Oilers. Where are you at on this team? What do you think? What's your like biggest thought coming into this season?
Oh, my biggest thought is Connor McDavid going to get pissed off that he didn't win the Hart and go back out there and try to put up 150 points to secure it, right?
That would do it.
Yeah, not only that, but now he's no longer going to be the highest paid player in the NHL after next season. So does he have something to say about that, right? Is he going to play with a chip on his shoulder because of all this? And I'm just excited to see a full year of Evander Kane. I'm hoping that, you get young guys like Jesse Puljujarvi, Yamamoto take those next steps. And then just super excited for the goaltending. I think more than anything else with this team to finally say, it's been – I can't even remember the last time this team had a competent goaltender where I felt pretty good about what they had in the net going into a season. And so finally, you don't have the Mike Smiths, the Koskinens that are just weighing you down. And so they can finally feel good about what they had back there. Even with Stuart Skinner, I feel pretty good about him as a backup goaltender. So you go in and now you say essentially I would assume they go in and they can, analysts and podcast people can come in and say, you know what, I don't think the goaltending is the weak spot anymore of this team. So I'm excited for that.
That all depends. Do you get Jack Campbell of October, November, last year, or do you get Jack Campbell of January, February? Because there was a gulf of difference between the two, and you expect a guy to be coming in confident, obviously, with a new team, and he gets the contract, and maybe some of the poor play was due to something being in his head about, like, I have to keep this up if I want to get paid, and then he started to have a few struggles, and maybe that got into his head. I don't know, but I do know that he's a streaky goalie, and that's something we certainly have seen with other Leaf goaltenders too. That was kind of a Frederik Andersen thing. He would have these super crazy stretches where he was really good, and then he'd have his down spurts. But maybe that's more of a Leafs thing and less of a who was their goaltender.
Yeah, and maybe you think, this year, right? So you look at this four group similar to Toronto. You say, okay, they can go out and they can put up 6-7 goals in a game if they need to bail their goalie out. Right,
no big deal if you have a bad game, you still have a chance.
Right, exactly. So I think maybe there's some, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? That's got to be a confidence boost for a goaltender to know that it's not on your shoulders every single night. Much like, for instance, Sorokin had to bail out the Rangers on some nights because they just literally were playing so poorly defensively. Now, again, speaking of defense, I think maybe that's the area where I have concern now as someone who's just on the outside looking in. I look at, everybody outside Darnell Nurse, and to be quite honest, I'm not too high on Darnell Nurse myself.
I think he's Darnell Nurse, maybe not a $9.25 million defenseman, but I do still think, he's
a top four guy, for sure.
I think he's probably still, he's still a top pairing defenseman. You're still looking at a guy who's a $7.5 million player. So is he overpaid a little bit? Yes. Is that maybe because he, it's Edmonton, you got to pay to keep your one defensive stud that you have at this point, which I know Evan Bouchard's coming up at the end of this year. So I know he's the one on the defensive side that I'm looking at the most going. He put up 43 points last year, 12 goals. He had a really good playoff too with 9 points. I'm looking at Evan Bouchard going, what kind of year is he going to have? Because he is poised to get paid pretty highly here in
right. And that's the thing. If his offensive production eclipses Darnell Nurse for a second year in a row, right? Granted, yes, it's only been a small sample size, so but
Darnell Nurse was never a guy who was going to put up 60 points.
Well, no, absolutely not. But maybe Bouchard uses that as leverage and says, hey, you know what? You're paying this guy for that offensive production. Now, again, Darnell Nurse, like you said, brings a lot more to the table. But, again, he's got a lot more leverage and a lot more power in negotiations to say, hey, I'm your best offensive weapon. You got to pay me, right? So
yeah, you got to think he's going to get at least 6 probably in the following year, which is okay. They've got some options. They could move Tyson Barrie if need be. If Bouchard eclipses Tyson Barrie and Tyson Barrie is not effective this upcoming season, with 1 year left on his deal, they certainly could move a Tyson Barrie. But tell you, Tyson Barrie still put up 41 points in 73 games, so he's still doing his thing. And you have to ask the question, how, and I don't have the stat right in front of me, but how many points did anyone on this defense get because of the guys in front of them, and you pass the puck up to someone else and they do most of the work. So that certainly is a factor as well. But to me, is the question still not can this team score, because we know that they can score, but outside of Connor and Leon, what are we going to see from especially the bottom six again? The bottom six is really becoming the big question for so many teams, because you're seeing the high end top six, especially the top line players. They're all making double digits or close to it as these young kids start to get paid, right? Like they're getting $8 million, $10 million for the top guys. And suddenly, and that's squeezing your bottom six. So a lot of these teams are having to kind of patch together a bottom six. And frankly, it's why Colorado was able to win, because they weren't paying their top guys so much money. You know, McKinnon's making $6 million again this year. So they're able to have some more veteran experience, some higher paid players down in their lineup. Whereas you have teams like Toronto, you're starting to see it a little bit with Tampa Bay. You see it with the Pittsburgh Penguins a little bit. And you see it with the Edmonton Oilers, where their bottom six is just not. It really, like, you look at it and you go, oh, where are the goals going to come from down there? Because you kind of have to, bring in those guys who maybe have potential to score but haven't had much in the past, and a lot of times it doesn't result in much. So can they get scoring from that bottom six? Because that was really the difference between the Oilers and the Avs in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's the big concern when you look at this team and you say, okay, cool, who's down there, right? You've got Warren Fogle, Derek Ryan. These guys are putting up barely 20, 25 points. And, when you look at a team like Colorado, who, was able to put JT Compher, Alex Newhook, these guys were hitting over 30 points. You got production out of these guys, and guys like, come playoff time, you had Darren Helm even chipping in with a few, key goals here and there, right? So
exactly.
That's the difference, and that's where I think you're going to see Edmonton really struggle. Now, regular season play, not really going to matter. I think they're going to get in and just be fine. But yeah, when it comes to playoff time, right, that's my big concern for them, because yes, you could maybe put Ryan Nugent-Hopkins down in that third line to center that line and give you a little bit more production. But, when he's got nobody who can finish, because he's traditionally a passer first,
sure,
it's kind of worthless.
Like, yeah, you got to hope that Puljujarvi or Yamamoto, one of those two, figures out their life and that they put together a good season.
Right.
Now, one thing that I have not heard anyone talk about, and I know that maybe it's because it's the beginning of the season and everyone's positive, but let's talk about Evander Kane for a moment. He has been in other situations before, Winnipeg, Buffalo, and San Jose. I would say all three of those situations ended poorly, right? Like, they started out fine, but they all ended poorly. And, this is now his first full season at Edmonton. Do we see a different Evander Kane? We saw a very obedient, I'll just say, like, obedient and neutral, like just a good boy. We saw the good boy Evander Kane. Does that keep going? Is it like that would be a huge concern of mine, is that this guy has become an absolute poison in every locker room he's ever been a part of. I know he's 31 now. There is something to be said about your age and maturing over time, but you can't take the ass out of the donkey. There's somewhere in there. It's you got to wonder.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the difference between Edmonton and when you talk about the Atlanta Thrashers, Winnipeg, Buffalo, San Jose, when he was with all these other teams, right, he was kind of expected, maybe not Atlanta, but when he first showed up in Winnipeg that first season and puts up 30 goals, I think moving forward, he had this expectation that he was going to be the goal scorer on each team, right? When he went to Buffalo, he was expected to be the guy to put up the goals for that team. When he went to San Jose, right? Yes, they had some good leadership in there and some good veteran guys, but he was still the guy who had to score the goals for the team, right? He was the $7 million man in San Jose, and they expected him to lead the charge, and for the most part he did. But I think here in Edmonton, right, you don't have to have that kind of pressure on him, because he has those just two high-flying forwards, playing at center to kind of, to carry the load, per se. And so really he can just kind of ride their coattails, and that's kind of what everybody expects him to do, right? Just go in there and let Connor McDavid set you up, and you just have to finish. So, I think if he shows up this season and just, continues to put it in the net, and I mean, listen, he had 22 goals in 43 games last year, 13 in the 15-game playoffs he was in, and I think, again, I don't think he's going to get 13 and 15, that type of production in the regular season, but If he can put up 40 goals in the regular season and is on that kind of pace all year long, I don't think anybody's gonna bug him, and I don't think he'll be any sort of poison just because, again, I think at this point in his career, I almost get the sense that there's a little bit of a maturity now that whole gambling bankruptcy issue is kind of behind him. He's settled with San Jose out of court now. I think he can just focus on hockey and, really just, again, just not have to worry about those demons in his life.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's not me hoping that it's going to happen or predicting that it's going to happen. It's just it's just the looking at it and going, well, I mean, this has literally fallen apart every place that he's played. Now, granted, it's usually by season 2 or 3, so I think we're okay right now because we've only been through half a season. So maybe this conversation is better in like a year or two down the road. But you know what? Maybe, I mean, I was thinking, well, it's Edmonton. I mean, maybe he just like can't get in as much trouble. But then again, he was in Winnipeg and Buffalo, so he's found a way. He's found a way, and you travel all over the country, anyways. But I wish the best for him. I hope that he can have a career year because really he's poised to have it. 39 points in 43 games last year, and 49 and 56 the year before. So he is almost a point per game player. I think his career high is 57 points. And that was in 2011-12. I think he's absolutely poised to probably shatter that by a pretty significant margin. If he stays healthy, you have to think he's going to put up 65 to 70 points pretty easily.
Yeah, I would put the over-under on him at 70 points for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of goals, I would think he's going to set a career high for goals as well if he continues on the clip that he's been on. I mean, he could end up with 40 goals, no problem.
Yep. Yeah. When you got Connor McDavid dishing you the puck, I mean, all you got to do is just tap it in.
Tap it in. See, Evander Kane, you just suck, and all you got to do is tap it in. That's why so many other players have been able to be unbelievable with Connor McDavid. Oh wait, that is a huge thing. Okay, you think like McDavid, Crosby too. There was always like we got to find the right guy for him to play with, because you can't just put anybody with him and watch him do what you're joking about, like just put your stick down and just tap it in. But you know who did do that? Was Mario Lemieux, and that is real. If you go and look at his line mates when he had like 199 points, and you look at the guys who had 100 points on his team, they never had 100 points ever again. Not anywhere close to it. Mario Lemieux made some careers, and you could put almost anybody with him, and he would play. I don't know why that just popped in my mind, but
I'm glad you thought of it though.
Some really good players, you can put anyone with them and they'll be good. Just a pure line driver. I actually think that to some extent that's Patrick Kane. Man, you put anyone with Patrick Kane and they seem to have career years.
Well, we're gonna find out this year for sure.
That is very true. Let's see who Patrick Kane can.
Tyler Johnson is about to have a career year.
Ooh, baby. Okay, well, let's before we do our floor and our ceiling for these teams, I'll just give a quick explanation. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, we're just giving our floor, where we think the most likely place for the bottom of each team is, and then of course their ceiling, what they're ultimately the best that they could possibly do with the lineup that they currently have. We're not going any doomsday scenarios where McDavid and Draisaitl both get injured, because if that happens, then we'll throw everything else out the window. But given a normal season, what do we think that floor and the ceiling is? So, Justin, where are you at with the Oilers?
Yeah, I think floor, I got to say, probably a first-round loss, right? I mean, it's easy for me to just – I can easily put them in the top 3 in this division without any question, right? So they get in. That's not a question, but it's that matchup in that first round, right? So we've you mentioned at the beginning of the show that really all these other teams are getting better. And as the competition gets a little bit tighter, a little bit stiffer there, I think teams like maybe Vegas, who might be, end up being a wild card, Los Angeles, if they're a first round matchup for Edmonton, they could potentially upset or, take it 7 games and beat Edmonton, no problem, especially if, like I said, that defense doesn't really play out the way, it could, or, just lacks thereof, I guess. And then if they don't get that, that bottom 6 scoring either, right, and you have to go into a shootout fest, Connor McDavid, if he gets shut down, it just might not work out, right? And then as far as the ceiling's concerned, I think the conference finals for me is where I think I put this team. I think they're more than capable of getting there again. I don't think that's a question. They've got enough talent to do so, better goaltending this year to do so. Not that Mike Smith was bad or anything last year, but, depending on how streaky Jack Campbell is in the playoffs, we could see them go. But I still can't really put them past teams like Colorado, St. Louis, and even Minnesota, really, at this point.
Okay. Even Minnesota losing Kevin Fiala, huh?
Yeah, I still like them with Marc-Andre Fleury.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my floor for this team, I actually I think that my expectations are very high. I don't see this team losing in the first round, whether they're the 1-2. I don't care where they finish in this division. I look at every team in this division and go, the Oilers can and should beat any team. Now that doesn't mean that they will, but that to me that means that their floor is making it to the second round. Like they're going to win a round, and maybe someone gets hurt again and they have a difficulty. I mean, what if Leon Draisaitl wasn't hurt and he was perfectly healthy against Colorado? You think that would have made a difference in that series? Because I do. I think that he's that good. He was, I believe it was Jeff Merrick who said that he was the best player to ever play and not skate, like standing still or something like that.
Yeah, he put up 32 points in 16 games being injured. I mean, he could
not skate. He was like hobbling back to the bench. He was standing still. And Draisaitl, I heard him say, like, I had to change my game, and like it made him actually learn. And he was like, yeah, I realized how much more patient I could be, and how it's helped his game. He feels like it's going to help his game moving forward too. It's like, oh man. So Draisaitl gets hurt, plays unbelievable, and now he has more weapons in his arsenal because he just learned a new way to play hockey. It should be interesting to see. But anyways,
I thought for sure Draisaitl or McDavid could have possibly surpassed Wayne Gretzky for the most points in a playoff season, the way they were going.
Yeah. It was crazy. So yeah, I think their floor is like a second round loss, and I think their ceiling's a Stanley Cup. I think this team could win the cup. I think they can beat anyone. I no longer with Colorado losing Nazem Kadri. I think that's a huge loss. They also lose Burakovsky. Like they're seeing that hey, when you win, other guys get paid on your team. Again, their bottom 6 is not going to look quite as good, and they're still going to be fantastic. They're still a top 5 team in the league, probably the best team still in the league. But I do think that they are slightly worse than they were when they won the cup. Now, that also doesn't. They have a first round pick, so they can go out, and I've heard rumors of Patrick Kane, which. If the Colorado Avalanche find a way to go and get Patrick Kane, then fuck me in the asshole, because they win.
Win. I know, right?
They win.
You could potentially make a 3-team swap, and you could bring him in at like $2.5 million if another team eats half of it too. And shit, I mean, that just forget about.
Sorry
it.
to get so so descriptive, but that just throws out everything. If they had Patrick Kane, then it's like almost like an auto win.
Just put Rantanen and Patrick Kane on that second line, and I would just see every team die.
Unreal. Yeah, who cares who their goalie is? I know they've got Georgiev and Francouz, but maybe they just toss in. Let's see who's down here. Trent Miner. They could put Trent Miner. I don't even know who Trent Miner is, but he could play. He could play and win the cup for them.
There you go.
Okay. Well, so the Edmonton, but I do think they could win the Stanley Cup, especially the fact that you can always they will certainly, if they're in a position this year, which I think going into the trade deadline this year, they're going to be in a much different position than they were last year. If you remember, like it was like, are the Oilers even going to make the playoffs? You know, and Ken Holland saying like, yeah, we're not trading a first round pick when we have no idea if we're even going to make the playoffs. That'd be stupid. They go and make the playoffs. They also signed Evander Kane, so that he kind of fell in their lap. Like, what a beautiful arrangement that turned out to be, because that was better than any trade they could have made. But this next year, they've got first, second, and third round pick in the 2023 draft. Granted, that draft's going to be pretty decent, but likely, you know, if you think you could win the Stanley Cup, you probably are going to move that for any number of free agent UFAs coming up the following year. So they'll only enhance what they already have. But there's the Edmonton Oilers. Should we go to the Los Angeles Kings?
Let's do it.
Well, can Drew Doughty stay healthy all year? There it is.
That is pretty much it, right?
Can Drew Doughty stay healthy all year? I know that Drew Doughty is not a Norris Trophy winning defenseman anymore, but he did have 31 points in 39 games last year. He was fantastic, and that's impossible to replace. So, do we see Drew Doughty full healthy? I mean, it seemingly injuries have really never been an issue for Drew Doughty in the past. This is really the first time that he missed a real significant chunk of games in his entire career. I mean, the most games he missed before that was he played 77. So he's never really had much of injury issues. So you got to hope that he can come back, bounce back, stay healthy. And, you know, how big of a difference would a healthy Drew Doughty have made in the playoffs last season?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, listen, I think even if Doughty is not 100% or, you know, does get injured again at some point, I still think this defensive core is still good enough to compete and be, you know, I don't want to say competitive night in and night out, but, you know, outside of the playoffs, I think they can still stay in just about any game with this group here. I mean, listen, Matt Roy and Michael Anderson were the top pairing for most of the year, and I think they did a fantastic job. You know, they bring in Alexander Edler, who I think is going to be a very good number 6, 7 defenseman to have for a veteran present, especially because they do have a lot of young guys like Sean Dursey, Sean Walker, you know, only 27, so he's still kind of getting into his prime as well. And so there's some really good names. And again, if you get a healthy Drew Doughty throughout the year, that's only just, I mean, that's gangbusters as far as I'm concerned. So it's like adding a really good top 6 forward to your, you know, forward group at, you know, the deadline time. It's just, you're getting that incredible of a piece. Now, what's more concerning for me this year, I think more or less than Drew Doughty staying healthy, is are we going to get good goaltending, right? I mean, Cal Peterson was essentially handed the keys to the car last year and just couldn't seem to take off and claim that number 1 spot. Jonathan Quick came in and was really good to start the year. I mean, essentially took back his starting job and said no thank you, but he's in a contract year this year, and you know, unfortunately, he wasn't able to sustain that kind of success throughout the whole year, and neither was Cal Peterson when he was streaky just like Jonathan Campbell. But which you have to wonder how much of that is being without your number 1 defenseman, right? Like, sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of have to adjust, right? Because Drew Doughty brings an element to his game that I don't think any other defenseman on their roster can really bring, right? Like, he can play both offensive and defensive hockey so well. Being a right-handed shot, I mean, he moves the puck just way better than I think most defensemen in this league can. But, you know, again, and so when you don't have him back there, right, you kind of have to play a tighter defensive system, and you're not pinching up as much. You're not trying to, you know, you might not be able to make that first pass out of the zone as easily either. So, yes, that definitely probably comes into play a lot with Cal Peterson or Jonathan Quick. But I need one of these goaltenders to step up and take the reins. Now, Jonathan Quick, in a contract year at 36, maybe wants to say, hey, you know what? I'm still a starting goaltender here for, you know, I've got a couple more years left in me. You know, maybe that Marc-Andre Fleury kind of swan song kind of situation going on. I don't know, but I mean, he had a nice year last year, and his playoff numbers are certainly skewed because the LA Kings gave the Oilers a little scare. Let's not fool ourselves. I mean, they pushed them to 7 games.
the games the Oilers won, he wasn't great in them. The Oilers offense just took over at times. And I don't know if that's all on Jonathan Quick.
No, and I won't put that all on him either, right? Because like I said, this defense is still young, so I think losing, that first round series is going to do wonders for this team and what they're able to, how they're able to grow as, a group collectively.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also, there's so many young kids on this team too. They basically took a step earlier than they expected. I would think that one of the bigger questions is, Quentin Byfield. He only put up 5 goals in 40 games last year and 10 points. He only got into 2 of those playoff games. He was not a factor. But he's only 20 years old. I don't think anybody's super worried about him being a bust. But, this would be the year to take a step, for Quentin Byfield. And he's kind of had a rough start. Remember his rookie season, he gets hurt. What was it, the first game of the season? Or really, really early on, he got injured. Yeah, he only played 6 games his rookie season. So that certainly is going to set you back. And not to mention COVID and all the weirdness of basically him coming into the league at that time. So you do wonder, can he take a good step this year? Because you don't want to end up like the Rangers having your second overall pick, first, whatever, where they're really just not taking the steps necessary. So I think it's a big year for Quentin Byfield and Arthur Kaliev to a point. Yeah.
I mean, you want to see those young guys, and especially because, they're still a competitive team. They're still a quality playoff team, and they've got the pieces to shelter these younger guys and allow them to take those next steps, right? They're not like, trying to shove them in the first line roles at 18, 19 years old and say, okay, cool, go figure it out, right? They're giving them the opportunity and sheltered minutes to grow so they don't have to go up against top pairing Ds all the time and see the other team's top line. So, Kopitar and Danault are still going to be the top line centers for these teams or for this team. And so, yeah, Quentin Byfield might see some more power play minutes because he only played, I think, roughly 12 minutes last year. And so you want to see, a few more minutes out of him. So
yeah, you'd like to see that a big body be used properly on the power play for screening or, getting those rebounds. Yeah. That'll be interesting. I mean, it's going to be a tough division. Like, if there's one team in this division that I'd be worried about to not make the play, like to have maybe a regression, it would be the LA Kings. There's a few things that could go wrong. They do have a 35-year-old Anze Kopitar. You've got a 32-year-old Drew Doughty who's coming off of a pretty serious injury. You've got a 36-year-old Jonathan Quick. There are some more aging veterans on this team. And even if you have a really good season again, you could have almost an identical season and you could miss the playoffs. Because when you look at the standings last season in the Eastern Conference, you had teams with 100 points making the playoffs, and that was the cutoff, was 100 points. So you just, it makes me wonder, LA could have another really good year, but also miss the playoffs because Vancouver's better and Vegas is better and Anaheim's better and even Seattle is better than they were last year, I think.
Yeah, the points got to come from somewhere, right?
Yep. So it'll be interesting. What do you think of this team's ceiling and floor?
Yeah, floor, I think I kind of agree with you. I think they could be a bubble team that just misses the playoffs because of all those factors you said, right? If you look at their top guys, Kopitar, Doughty, Quick, Peterson, whomever's in net, Quick especially, they're just older, right? So the body tends to give. You slow down eventually, and when that happens for these guys, I don't know. Can they just keep it up again this year? It's more than possible for sure. But it's also possible that, things come off the rails. Kopitar just has a down year, isn't able to keep up because, like you said, teams like Vegas, Vancouver are getting better. And, between Vegas and Los Angeles, it was only a 5-point difference. And so you get a whole year of a healthy, Jack Eichel and Mark Stone. And
right, it's like a 2-win split, and suddenly right. It's different. Yeah, there's a lot that could happen.
So for the floor, it's easy for me to just say this team's just on the outside looking in. Now for the ceiling, I think this team, probably probably a second round team again. I just honestly think they don't have, and we didn't talk about Kevin Fiala, right? I mean, he's a guy that could come in here and definitely help put up some offensive firepower for this team.
Yeah, it certainly changes the top six.
Right. But, again, too, I just worry with everybody else getting better. How much better did LA get? I just have concerns with that goaltending a little bit too much to feel confident to really put them up. If you want to say they're going to go deep against teams like Calgary and Edmonton and Vegas, I have my doubts, because if I had to pick, anybody out of that top five who could potentially fall, I'm with you. I think LA could be that team. And so to me, I think really their ceiling just kind of stops at the second round for me.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta throw them in the second round because they were one game away from it last season. So
yep.
They absolutely got better adding Kevin Fiala. So and you think they're such a young team that guys are going to take a step, and with a healthy Drew Doughty, even if he's not, the Norris Trophy winner Drew Doughty, and he's just a step behind that, you still have a great defenseman. So I think the LA Kings probably a second round. I don't see them going in and beating the Oilers. I don't think they could beat the Flames, but if maybe they end up in this wild card spot, and I don't know, then they would play one of those teams probably. It would be tough. It would be tough for them to get to the second round. But again, hey, they pushed the Oilers to 7 games, and maybe those guys are the difference. The Doughty and getting a little bit better goaltending, you get a little luck. There also is the luck factor, and I would agree. Second round, probably there's definitely their ceiling. Their floor, I of course can see them missing the playoffs. I see them though like a total bubble, like missing the playoffs by less than 5 points. Probably is their floor to me. Okay, let's go to the San Jose Sharks. Who's worse in this division, Justin? Is it the San Jose Sharks or the Seattle Kraken this next year? Who's worse?
You know what? I'm gonna say San Jose. I really am. You just lost, in my opinion, your best defenseman in Brett Burns, right? I mean, not necessarily. It's not like losing a Drew Doughty for the whole year, right? When we talked about LA here, but I just don't. I don't know what it is, and I can't really put my finger on it. But it's like when you meet somebody and they just rub you the wrong way, right? And you just know instantly, like they're
hate
bad.
Hate this
guy. I just don't like this person. Yeah. I look at San Jose the same way. Like I just don't like them. There's just nothing there to get me excited. And when you look at the goaltending, right? Like James Reimer, he's fine, serviceable goaltender. I think
he's a backup.
Yeah, he's a backup.
Very, very 1B.
Right. Kakkonen, again, I still think he's a 1B as well. I don't think he's going to be a tremendous starter in this league, but I do think he is a quality guy who can give you 30, 40 games if you need him to. But when you look at that defense, right, Erik Karlsson just hasn't been there since he's been in LA or been in San Jose. Vlasic, you're not getting anything much out of him anymore at this point. I still think he's an okay number 4 or 5 defenseman, but $7 million guy, no way. Just too slow at this point in his career. And then looking at this forward group, I still think, Timo Meier is a quality player, but he might be traded at some point this year, right? I mean, again, he's an RFA, but he might come and say, you know what, I have no plans on, staying here long term, right? So maybe he just gets moved at some point because, a new GM in here, Mike Greer, comes in and says, you know what, we're just going to start shaking things up. Maybe they're too far removed from the playoffs, and they just, say, you know what, it's time to hit the reset button. I know they don't want to admit it, and I know they don't want to, especially with Vlasic and Karlsson's contracts holding them down for the next few years. I know they think they can still be competitive, but, maybe it's time. And so Timo Meier is your best trade chip. So, maybe they say, see you later.
I mean, there are 3 fantastic players to be had in this next draft, possibly 3 franchise players in the 2023 draft. And, to me, it makes all the sense in the world for San Jose to go, you know what? The problem is that they're probably not worse than the Kraken, because the Kraken are going to dress a very young lineup. Their top two centers potentially are both under 20 years old, and I don't know that San Jose is going to be worse, because San Jose has a pretty good top line. You know, that, like, as far as the three players they could throw in there, Hurdle, Couture, and Meyer, that's a pretty solid first line that's going to win you some games. And, you know, the rest of the lineup it's not great, but they do have some players that can make some you know, Luke Kunin looked really good last year, and San Jose acquires him in a trade from the Nashville Predators. There's some guys that are going to get opportunities to play because of the lack of depth, and I just don't know if this team is as bad as they'll need to be. But also they could be. I do think they could be really bad, but they're kind of like Chicago. Like, yeah, Chicago's going to be bad, but they also have Jonathan Toews and particularly Patrick Kane. Like, how bad are you really going to be with those guys on your team?
Well, I mean,
and Seth Jones. Like,
I look at them like they were Chicago of last year, right? We're going into the season, we expected them to compete for a playoff spot, and, you know, they had good pieces, right? But they couldn't put it together. And that's all I see out of this team over the last few years, is they have good players on paper, but they just can't put it together and finish.
Yeah, you wonder. I mean, if there's any time to just kind of go, you know, let's just move some guys. Let's try to get a good pick in this next draft. It's certainly this draft. So we'll see with San Jose. I mean, it is a hard team to look at. You're right, like you said right off the bat, they're not exciting. If there were some players, if this was 5 years ago, there's, you know, Erik Karlsson, certainly a guy to get excited about, but he just has not been what anyone expected in San Jose. Quite possibly one of the worst moves in the history of the NHL for any team in terms of what you gave up, and then what you end up getting and what you end up paying, and therefore what you end up losing in the long term because of this is just spectacular. How bad it has been for the San Jose Sharks when you consider what they gave up to get Erik Karlsson. It has just been a disaster.
Yeah. Now, I will say on the positive side, because I don't want to spend the whole entire our whole time on San Jose just ripping them to pieces.
Well, why not?
Why not?
Can we just look at the players that Ottawa, because of that trade, they got Dylan DeMello and Chris Tierney, two solid players for the time being at that trade when it was made in 2018. By the way, they also got Joshua Norris in that trade.
Cool.
Oh, and also they drafted Tim Stützle with the pick in 2020.
Oh yeah, terrible player. Yeah.
So I mean, basically they got two top six centers. Oh, and by the way, Chris Tierney, not a bad top 9 forward on a good team. Who he very well might get traded this season too, and an attempt to fetch some more assets for him in return. Oh wait, I'm sorry, he's gone. He's at the Florida Panthers. So yeah, okay. I forgot he was a free agent.
Yeah, but I mean, so one positive for this team, right? William Eklund, I will say, young kid, 19 years old. I think this is someone who has potential to come in. You know, he saw 9 games last year and put up 4 points, looked pretty good. So he got that little tryout to start the year, and maybe he comes in this year again, has a good camp. He's a guy I could see potentially cracking this lineup and, maybe getting an opportunity to play in that top 9 somewhere, and could potentially be a guy who, in my opinion, I think could be a good top 6 forward in the future. Yeah,
and 7th overall pick. You hope that he can make a difference and make one quickly.
Right, yeah. Because that could be, again, when you have a guy like Timo Meier that you want to keep around, you could say, hey, we got young guys coming up that are going to, keep this team competitive, so why don't you hang around?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the only way you're going to get them to stick around. I mean, I think Timo Meier he can go to arbitration. Can he go to arbitration, I think?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Yeah. And then, 1 year, and then he's a UFA. So you're getting close to a point where you kind of got, you got to figure out where you're going. And I think that Mike Greer his personality and the way that what he's done since taking over, I think he has instilled a lot of confidence. But I don't think that this is a 1 year, 2 year turnaround. I think this is going to be pretty painful. It almost in some ways reminds me of the Red Wings, where you just had to kind of look and go, oh, that guy's contract's on the book for another 4 years. And so is his, right. And so is his, and so is his. I guess we're just going to be bad for a minute because we don't have a choice, and we're just going to have to roll these guys out.
Right.
That's kind of reminds me of that.
Justin Abdelkader and Darren Helm.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Johan Franzen. And, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the San Jose Sharks, to me, a ceiling, I don't see them going any further than, maybe at times having some nice little streaks because the pressure's off, but I really don't see them finishing any higher than, maybe they have some nice stretches and they end up third last in the division. They end up in sixth instead of seventh, but I think it's somewhere sixth or seventh in the division, and I do think that their floor is last place in the division. Especially if they trade Timo Meier, or they do anything to lose talent on purpose to acquire some assets for the future, then you're looking at a situation where I lean more towards my floor than my ceiling.
There you go. Yeah, I think I think exactly the same thing, right? I think the ceiling for this team is maybe a sixth spot, and you got to think for a ceiling. Or a floor, I think, last place. I
don't think last place in the league.
No, not like that. No, I mean, in this division, right? I still think teams like Arizona, Chicago are going to be much worse. But I think a team like Seattle, who made improvements and, might have a nice little 1-2 punch at center, could potentially, make some strides if they get better goaltending this year. And so, that could see some points coming out of San Jose. And, like I said, with every other team really in this division getting a little bit better, they've gotten worse in my opinion, so they could potentially, sink to the bottom.
Okay. Well, speaking of getting better, our last Pacific Division team maybe has the Calder Trophy all locked up with Mason McTavish. If you talk to anyone in Anaheim, he's, for the second year in a row, the Anaheim Ducks could very likely have a centerman up for Rookie of the Year in Mason McTavish. This is a team that took good steps last year. They were exciting to watch, and all they did was go out and sign the top defenseman in free agency, and are bringing in now Mason McTavish. So their top six is going to be packed full of offense, but also a lot of youth.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. I think Mason McTavish has got to be my Calder favorite right now at this point. I really like his game. He brings a little bit of grit, but he's got a lot of offensive swag to him. And if I'm not mistaken, too, he was the captain for Team Canada.
Yes.
For the World Juniors. So
I believe he scored the overtime goal.
Oh, yeah, you might be right.
In World Juniors,
But, I mean, look, he came in and put up 3 points in 9 games to start the season, just like, William Eklund to get that little 9-game stint there. But, man, he looked so dominant in the OHL and looked really good in the AHL with San Diego for a few games. So I don't really think there's any reason why not to think he's still going to be dominant at the professional level, too. He's got all the tools. I think he can very well be competitive. And if you pair him with, look, they bring in, Ryan Strome this offseason, so I think they've got a good 1-2 punch with Zegras and Strome. Not the most ideal 1-2 punch, but I think, Strome allows a guy like Trevor Zegras to grow a little bit, and you can put McTavish at center if you want at that third line, or you can put him on the wing with one of these two guys, and I think that's, going to be a great opportunity for him because it just, gives you a little bit more flexibility, too, if you're Anaheim, to really, give this guy an opportunity. So, this forward group, like you said, is really young. Troy Terry, Zegras, McTavish. They've got some good young guys in here, but they've also got some decent veterans between, Adam Henrique and Strome, who I think can still stabilize that middle six fairly well. Jacob Silverberg, we'll see what we get out of him. And, on the back end, right, you still got Cam Fowler. You've got John Klingberg, who kind of, in my opinion, fell into their lap, right? I mean, really, he was looking for an opportunity to sign a long-term deal at a high dollar amount. I don't think he got that from anybody. And eventually things started drying up, and, Anaheim said, hey, we've got a ton of cap, and we, wouldn't mind having you here so you can put up a ton of points and then go re-sign somewhere else.
Or re-sign in Anaheim. He did have...
Maybe.
I'll say John Klingberg had a little bit of he's had a little dip. He hasn't been quite as good. 2017-18, 67 points. And even in 18-19, in 64 games, he had 45 points. But last year, his 6 goals, 47 points in 74 games. There was a considerable drop-off, a minus 28, which on a defensive team does raise some eyebrows. But, this is just two or three playoffs ago where this guy had 21 points in 26 games and helped take the Dallas Stars to the Stanley Cup Finals. You got to think there's something left in the tank. But I understand being worried about signing a 30-year-old defenseman clearly on a decline to like an 7-year deal or a 5-year deal. Like, you're just not sure what you're going to get. So, perhaps this is his opportunity to prove that he, maybe was being held back in Dallas.
Yeah, and I mean, the great thing is, right, so you've got Jonathan Klingberg in here, and if, maybe things don't work out, maybe he's just not willing to sign long-term with this team, whether it's a dollar amount argument or term, whatever, you've got a really good trade asset that I think, again, just a few years removed from a really good playoff run, teams are going to look at this guy, and he is right-handed too, so they come in high demand.
It's it reminds me of Taylor Hall signing in Buffalo. To some respect. Maybe, obviously Klingberg doesn't have the same star power that Taylor Hall had coming into there. Taylor Hall had won a Hart Trophy 2 seasons prior, but John Klingberg, I mean, yeah, he signs there. He's going to be a deadline trade unless Anaheim really blows us out of the water and they're in contention and they go, hey, we can hang on to this guy and maybe he helps you make the playoffs.
Yeah. But if anything, I think it also gives them, a little bit more time, and they don't have to rush Jamie Drysdale into a prominent role with this team either, because look, I think this is a defenseman who could break out even more this year, 32 points in 81 games. Maybe needs to work on the defensive side of his game a little bit more, but listen, he's got the size, he's got the speed to do it. And so, if he can maybe take that next step this season, you can look at, Jamie or John Klingberg as being more expendable and saying, hey, we don't have to sign this guy. Let's just trade him anyways, regardless where we are in the standings. Now, again, if you're firmly in a playoff spot, yes, absolutely. Maybe hang on to him, if you want to try to make a run, because playoff experience is going to be nothing but great for this, young group. But, if anything, again, you don't have to put Jamie Drysdale, up against the Connor McDavids and the Jonathan Huberdeaus of this division, right? You can put John Klingberg and Cam Fowler out there every night and let them play those top minutes, and then have Jamie Drysdale on that second line.
You can shelter him. You can shelter him quite a bit, and give him more offensive zone faceoffs for sure. Yeah,
because you don't want Kevin Shattenkirk on your top line again. I think he's very good in a third pairing, second power play role still. And he's going to be another guy, too, who's going to be a huge trade chip because he still can produce offensively, still can skate, and he's only a $3.9 million as a right-handed shot. He could easily fetch a second-round plus for this team for sure.
Yeah, well, he won a cup with Tampa, right? Yeah, 2019, yeah.
Sure did.
Had a pretty good playoff there, too. Okay, so the biggest question to me, I think we know these young players are going to shine. This is going to be a fun team to watch. The biggest question is, is John Gibson in the last 3 seasons, he's put up a 904, 903, and a 904 save percentage, under average goaltender in the NHL at this point. I'm not going to, the goals against, he's been on a bad team. There's not, some of that is understandable. But that's over about 140 games. In his last 140 games, he's at about a 904 save percentage. And if he's in that position again next year, or we look back and we go, another 903, 904 a year, suddenly John Gibson becomes, I mean, we're solely in the conversation of he's done. Like, as far as being an elite goalie, he's done. Any chance that we see the John Gibson of old?
I mean, listen, I don't think John Gibson is a terrible goalie or even an average goalie. I still think he's a top 10 goalie in this league, if you want my honest opinion. I think he can still bring it. I just think the defense and team structure in front of him has been all about offense because they want these young guys to succeed and shine a little bit and make this team, like you said, exciting to watch. So they've kind of sacrificed, right, the defensive end of the game for that. And I mean, it's clear when you look at this team. I mean, they finished a minus 39 as far as goal differentials are concerned because they could score goals. But, if you look at the goals against, besides Seattle, which I'm, throwing them out the window, they were, second worst as far as goals against in this, division and fourth worst in this conference. So, does that fall all on him? No, I don't think so. I think this team, if they can tighten up a little bit better defensively, play maybe, with a little smarter hockey up front and, that'll allow the goals to come with them. If you focus on the defense first, I think these young guys up front are so talented. I think the goals will come naturally. But again, right, you got another year of Dallas Eakins as the head coach, so I don't think much is going to change as far as systems are concerned. I mean, the question is, does he stay there all year, right? Because there were rumors circulating this year about him potentially being dealt. And, I think any other team with a halfway decent defensive structure, he's an easy top 10 goalie in this league for sure, right? I mean, you can go slap him in a team like, Florida, right? You looked at the way Bobrovsky was just mediocre this year. He was good, but if you put him in a team like Florida, I think he's a 925, 930 save percentage goaltender all day long.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you have not lost faith in John Gibson. I mean, I say that he's still probably on a reasonably good defensive team. I think he's still that, what we saw in 18-19, a 917 save percentage. I think he's sitting at about just above an average goaltender for me. He certainly has great stretches, but I know Anaheim's defense was not great last year, but you know what? There's a lot of teams where their defense, like the Rangers, we've talked about it over and over again. Their defense is just no good. And what does Shesterkin do? He goes and wins the Vezina and statistically is the best goaltender in the league. And that's on a team that didn't play much defense. He's no
Shesterkin. I mean, that's clear.
Sure. And I'm not trying to compare him to that. I'm just saying that, yes, his team's defense isn't as great in front of him, but he still isn't stopping the shots that he should at times. And at times he looks very porous. And maybe your confidence gets rattled. He did have a really good start last year, but then your confidence get rattled. And, Anthony Stolarz as a backup goaltender, I don't know how excited you are about having him come in, although he had a really nice year last year with a 917 save percentage. So it's almost like Stolarz was better than Gibson last year, and maybe he's the guy. He's looking for a new contract too. He's UFA at the end of the year. If Stolarz can get in for 30, 40 games and he plays as well as he did last year, somebody's going to pay him $3.5 million a year to go and see if he can do it.
Yeah, I mean, Stolarz is going to be a good backup goaltender, and I think he'll, like you said, he'll sign somewhere else next year because they do have a young kid coming up, Lucas Dostal, who I think is going to be a really good goaltender in this league. I don't know if he's going to be Jonathan, Gibson good at his prime, or even a top 10 goaltender in this league per se, but I still think he's going to be a quality goaltender. So, I think it'll be another year in the minors, and then he'll come in full time, after the season. So, maybe after a year of that, maybe Anaheim says, you know what, let's get John Gibby out of here and save some money. But, hey, I think, I would like to see Gibson traded personally because I still think he's got more to offer. But either way, I think there's still room for improvement for John Gibson. You can only lose so much and be so bad for so long as a team, and it kind of takes its toll on you, I think, mentally. And so maybe maybe he just needs a change of scenery at this point, right? To get mentally refocused and
unfortunately, they're kind of wasting his best years, right? Like,
right, exactly.
All right, what's your floor and ceiling for this team?
Yeah, for the floor, I'll just start off with the easy one. I think, I think they kind of finished right where they were last year. The 7th spot there. I think they're going to get better offensively. I think guys like McTavish, Zegras are only getting better and going to improve this team. I think signing Ryan Strome is going to be an improvement. So I don't think they can get any worse than they were last year as far as wins and points are concerned. Now, where their ceiling is, I think they're still not a playoff team. I still think, again, the teams like Vancouver, Vegas got better with, a healthy Eichel and Stone. But I do think they can compete. So I think, ceiling for this team, I think they're going to be a bubble playoff team. I think they might push towards, 90-ish points. I don't think they'll get above 90 points, but I think they can get pretty close to make it interesting where maybe those last few weeks of the year you think, could they do it, right? Could they maybe go on a run and sneak in and ultimately, just fall just a little short? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I like the potential of, Jakob Silfverberg having a bounce back year. I think they did what they needed to do for a young team to surround them with, like we said, Ryan Strome and bringing in John Klingberg. I don't think it's enough to get this team into the playoffs, but I do think that it's enough to put them right around that 90-point mark. I think they'll be in the run for the playoffs. I think they ultimately fall reasonably short of making the playoffs. That like they'll be 8 to 10 points out of the playoffs, but they'll be in it for a long time. And I think that's all you can ask from this team is that they're in it for a while. And come trade deadline, they don't have a whole lot in terms of the UFA. There's not a lot that they're probably going to deal other than a John Klingberg and a Shattenkirk. But you're not going to trade your entire defensive core. So I think that for the most part, this team will stand pat. They'll continue to grow. And if they can get to anywhere close to 90 points, I think they would consider the season a success. So that's my ceiling. From a floor standpoint, I don't see this team being worse than San Jose or Seattle. I think they've got too much firepower, so I'm going to go 6th in the division for their floor.
Yep.
All right, well, there is the Pacific Division. We did it in 2 episodes. Congratulations, Justin. You did it.
I'm going to go celebrate with cake.
You're going to go celebrate by fixing a shower at your rental house.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, to our listeners, thank you for listening to the Pacific Division preview. We will be on to the Central Division next. Stay tuned for that. Follow us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. And Justin, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your night as well. We will. You can say something.
Yeah, I want to say you too. You have a great night.
Solid band. All right.
Solid.
See ya. being a team that can offer that type of opportunity into their top six. Not a lot of really good teams have just jump into our top six, no big deal. And
right.
We'll see what he can do to change. If he can do anything close to what Kirill Kaprizov did for the Minnesota Wild, then the Vancouver Canucks are going to be very, very happy. Well, with that said, should we do our floor and ceiling for the Canucks and get out of here?
Let's do it.
You go first.
All right. Yeah.
I want a copy off of you.
I mean, look, as far as the floor goes for this team, I think they're going to be similar to Vegas, where I think they're pushing for a wild card spot and just missing out. I think, I don't think they finish towards the bottom of this division at all. I think they're going to be very competitive under Bruce a full season and have an opportunity to really just let loose and play a little bit looser. And then as far as the ceiling is concerned, I think this is, again, similar to Vegas, where I think they could be a second round exit. I think that, again, there's going to be some growing pains, right? And that comes with winning. And, we've seen that with teams like Toronto. They've got to learn how to win first or got to learn how to lose first before they start winning. And hopefully Toronto does that this year. But, similar to Edmonton, they just couldn't get over that hump for a while. And I think now they've managed to do so. And so who knows where they go from here. But Vancouver, similar, I think, a lot of these younger guys like Besser and Pettersson who, really don't have too much of a taste of playoff success. They'll get in, and I think, depending on who they match up, whether it's, LA or, maybe, another team in the Central here, I think they have a good opportunity getting past that first round. But when you get in that second round and you got to go against those more experienced teams like Edmonton or maybe a team from the Central like St. Louis, I just don't really see them getting past that next step.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a playoff berth would be similar to what Los Angeles, I think, experienced this last year, going, okay, all right, sweet, we got in, we can build off of this, right? So
yep.
I agree that ceiling is let's contend for the playoffs. I'll say their ceiling is a bubble playoff team. They might get in, they might not. They'll be right, it's the 8-9 battle kind of vibe. Maybe they're battling for third place in the division because the Central still is just so good, and they might have 5 teams make it again. But I think that's less likely this next year, where I think you'll go back probably to a four-team split between the two divisions. But I think Vancouver's ceiling is definitely a playoff bubble team and a strong playoff contender. With Thatcher Demko back there, they'll always be in the mix. And they've got plenty of talent up front. Their floor, though, I can see a situation where really the beginning of last year was a bigger issue than we knew. And yeah, Bruce Boudreau came in, had a great end of the year. There was nothing to play for, and they come in this next year and they have some of the same issues, and things turn on them quick, and they end up, in that 35 to 40 win kind of category where it's just not enough to get you into the playoffs, and you're not really on the bubble. You're far enough out of it where you go, we never really were in it. We just made it look like we were. So I'd say that's the floor for me for Vancouver. They're too good to be a team that's in the bottom.
Sure.
But maybe not good enough to make the playoffs, which is where everyone hates to be, right? It's the worst place to be. So, anyways, this division will be a lot of fun because there are a lot of teams that think they can make the playoffs in this division. So that'll make it a lot of fun. We'll do Pacific Division Round 2 next show, and you keep your eye out for that. Until then, go back, listen to all 3 parts of the Metropolitan Division preview, and you can follow us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, have a great rest of your night, and to our listeners, we'll talk to you soon.